A digging crew stumbled upon something unbelievable when reinstating a local quarry. The large hole had been neglected for well over 2 decades. But when the need for stone rose again, this team was sent on a mission to clear out the rubble and make it operational again. But they quickly stumbled upon something they shouldn't have found when they started digging. Before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The crew arrived on Monday morning. It was still dark outside, and with the quarry's location far from town, it was nice and quiet. But that was about to change. Carl and his team were to clean up 25 years of overgrowth and debris from this forgotten quarry. It was a simple task for them, or so they thought. But that would prove to be a big misjudgment. The goal set for Carl and his team was to completely strip the quarry to its bare rocky walls and even expand it by well over 100 feet for more stone-delving possibilities. With a massively growing house market, the need for stone increased tremendously over the last couple of years, so old quarries like this needed to be reinstated fast. But there was one big problem, and that problem arose fairly quickly after they started delving. It took the team about 2 days to clear all the loose debris and the overgrowth from the quarry. But then, it sounded like a loud clang, the kind you get when metal hits metal. But why? Carl and his team knew that one of the metal components must have been the digging part of their crane. But what it slammed against was a mystery. The workers all laid down their gear and started running over to the hole created by the crane. Curiosity was piqued, and when the team looked into the hole created by the crane, they saw a metallic shimmer surface facing them. Carl ordered his crew to pick up shovels and smaller drilling equipment to excavate the object from the ground. The team started vigorously digging up and around the object. When the edges of the metallic object were cleared, they saw that it was at least 5 feet in diameter. "What is that?" crew members whispered. After a little bit more digging around the object, the team used their high-powered crane to do the rest of the lifting. Cables were attached to suitable areas, and with some wiggling of the vehicle, they managed to slowly move the object upward. The object was also at least 6 feet deep, and the team looked on in awareness of a massive safe with hidden treasure spread amongst workers. "Maybe there is money or gold inside. Whatever it is, this is exciting," one of Carl's workers said. But these thoughts couldn't be further from the truth because this object wasn't a safe at all, and it surely did not have anything to do with hidden treasure. It was, however, a massive secret that was supposed to stay hidden. But that hope was now officially ruined by Carl and his team. With the object removed from the ground, Carl and his team circled it as it stood between them. The metal was very corroded from being in the ground for so long, but it was clear to see the details of this mysterious object. There were doors on both sides, and Carl pulled on the handle of the first one. To his surprise, it opened up. The crew leader stood inside the object. It was a weird doorway about 3 feet deep with a clear entrance and exit door. Carl's team was confused, but Carl was a bit older and had seen some construction gear in his days. Carl opened the door on the exit side this time, seeing his curious team again as he left the object. They were still locked onto the object, wondering what it was, but Carl instantly walked past them as he stared into the hole from which they retrieved the tunnel door. Carl stared into the deep hole their crane had created and quickly saw an image that confirmed his suspicion. Where there was an old-school tunnel door, there also had to be a tunnel. The crew members followed Carl's finger and saw a round opening inside the hole. It's a tunnel! But where does it go? The crew members were excited and nervous at the same time, but nobody could have predicted what was really inside. Carl took a deep breath as he looked into the dark mouth of the tunnel. "All right, we're going in," he said, a hint of both caution and excitement in his voice. He signaled for the team to grab their flashlights, and even though they were a bit more hesitant than he was, one by one, they all obliged and followed Carl into the dark, unknown below. They were even more corroded than the doorway, indicating that this place had been untouched for decades. Dust and cobwebs filled the air as they proceeded. The tunnel walls, however, were unnaturally clean-cut, suggesting that this tunnel was either made by a tunneling master years ago or maintained throughout its years of existence. So the question kept looming. Who had dug it, and why? The crew's flashlights lit up rusted beams, the unmistakable evidence of engineering intended to withstand time. The tunnel twisted ahead, and the air grew colder with each step. A sense of mystery enveloped the place, and the quiet crunching of dirt beneath their boots was the only sound the team heard for a while. Carl led the way. His experience and natural leadership pushed them forward when others hesitated. He could feel the uncertainty of his crew behind him, their whispers becoming more nervous as they moved deeper. Then, the silence was suddenly shattered. A bone-chilling cry echoed through the tunnel. The crew froze, their flashlights shaking slightly as they all turned to Carl. Fear instantly grew within the group. It was the cry, the nervousness of the unknown, and the fear that the tunnel might collapse at any moment, trapping the team down there. Several crew members decided they'd had enough. One of them, a younger guy named Mark, muttered, "I'm not staying down here another second," and turned back. The others nodded in agreement, fear written across their faces. The group's footsteps echoed as they scrambled away. Carl did not try to stop them, as he understood their worry. He just watched as their bobbing flashlights faded into the distance. The tunnel was too narrow for the entire team anyway, and he didn't want anyone down here with him who didn't want to be there. "Fear is a liability down here," he said to the remaining cast. After the dust settled, Carl and only 5 other crew members remained inside the tunnel. They were alone in the dark but determined to press on. Carl told his team to stay strong together. They had come this far, and he wasn't about to turn back without understanding what they had discovered. "All right, if you want to stay, stick close. We're finding out what's in here," he said while pointing his flashlight to the road ahead. The remaining crew nodded, though the fear was still evident. As they proceeded, the tunnel seemed to narrow slightly, and the beams reinforcing it grew closer together. Carl also noticed that there were colored markings on the beams, all in the same shape but in a different shade. Carl couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led somewhere almost as if the tunnel itself was designed for them to follow, and Carl wasn't far off with this assessment. Suddenly, they heard the sound again, a soft, almost melodic whine further down the tunnel. This time, it seemed like a calling, drawing them in. Carl hesitated, glancing at the crew. "Are we doing this?" he asked. They all nodded. They were many, and the sound was just one. "Let's go. Let's move quietly," Carl whispered. The tunnel took a sharp turn, and as they rounded it, they were greeted with an astonishing sight. It was an underground chamber, larger than the ground floor of Carl's house. The team crawled through the narrow opening and moved cautiously into the space. Scribbled drawings were etched into the rocky walls, and tools leaned against the side of the cave-like room. They were old, but well-maintained. "What is this place? And why is all of this down here?" someone asked. But Carl had no answer. Carl approached a pile of tools and brushed away dust, revealing a symbol he vaguely recognized. There wasn't time to reflect. The sound returned, now joined by footsteps. The source was approaching fast. Footsteps echoed louder. Carl's crew exchanged nervous glances. "We have to hide," Carl whispered, motioning toward the tunnel. They crouched behind large boulders, flashlights dimmed. A group of elderly men, dressed in old work clothes, entered the chamber. All appeared to be over 60, with silver hair and worn faces. One carried an oil lantern, its swinging hinge producing the eerie whine they had heard. Now they understood the sound's origin harmless, yet amplified by the tunnel's acoustics. The men lit more lanterns placed around the chamber, illuminating makeshift beds crafted from metal carts and mining gear. One crew member gasped, catching the attention of the newcomers. "Who's there?" one man called out sternly. Carl signaled to stay still, but it was too late. The man moved toward their hiding spot. Carl turned and led the team back into the tunnel. They ran swiftly, reaching the first bend. But then a voice called after them, "Stop! We mean you no harm!" The tone was calm, not threatening. Carl halted. The lantern-bearing man stood still at the tunnel's end, not pursuing them. Carl turned to his crew. "We came to discover what's down here. Let's find out." They agreed and returned to the chamber. The elderly man raised his lantern, illuminating Carl and his team as they stood uncertain. "We just want to talk," he said gently. The others had returned to their beds, indifferent. The man stepped forward, offering his hand. "My name is John." His eyes held a curious gleam. "How did you find this place?" Carl explained they had been clearing debris at the quarry above when they discovered the tunnel door. John's eyes widened after Carl revealed how they found the tunnel, his expression filled with disbelief. The other elderly men looked equally stunned. Until now, they had remained calm, but Carl's words sparked a sudden change. They sprang from their makeshift beds, exchanging looks of shock and excitement. "After all these years," John murmured, overwhelmed with emotion. Tears welled in his eye-steers that puzzled Carl and his crew until the man began to speak. John revealed that he and the others were once miners, part of a crew working in the very mine they now inhabited. Decades ago, an earthquake struck during a routine dig. The ground shifted violently, collapsing most of the tunnels and trapping a group of workers deep underground. John paused, struggling with the memory. Most escaped, but we couldn't. We tried digging out but lacked the tools. Eventually, we realized no rescue was coming. We were assumed dead. His voice faltered. The other men nodded solemnly as John continued. Over time, they had accepted their fate. What was once a temporary shelter had become their home. For over 30 years, they survived in isolation, forgotten by the outside world but clinging to life underground. John explained how they lived off stockpiled provisions meant for a large crew. Canned goods, rice, beans just enough to stretch across decades, he said. But the worst part wasn't the food. It was the loneliness. Though his tone was steady, the toll of 3 decades was clear in his face. Carl was stunned. "You've been down here all this time?" he asked quietly. John nodded. "We had no choice. The tunnels were too dangerous to dig through." A heavy silence followed as the gravity of their experience settled in. But then Carl spoke, bringing hope. "We can help you. The door we found, it's open. There's a path to the surface." John's eyes widened again. Around him, the other miners stared in disbelief. "Are you serious?" he asked. Carl nodded. "Yes, we can get you out of here." For a moment, there was silence. Then John exhaled deeply, a sound that seemed to release the burden of 30 years. With Carl's guidance, the miners began the long journey back through the tunnel. When they emerged, the daylight was blinding. The men shielded their eyes, blinking as they took in the sky. The tree severy thing they hadn't seen in decades. They were finally free. Carl's crew escorted the miners to a hospital, where they were kept under observation for 2 weeks. The outside world had changed, but they were safe now and grateful to be alive. Some of the miners still had living relatives. Their reunions were deeply emotional. Watching them embrace, Carl, who rarely cried, wiped away a tear. "We came to reopen a quarry," he said, "but we ended up saving 8 lives." News of the discovery spread quickly. Carl and his team were hailed as heroes, appearing on national television and in newspapers. They didn't mind sharing their story. What mattered was that the miners were no longer lost. The old mine was sealed permanently to prevent further accidents, and the quarry project resumed months later. But nothing would erase the memory of what they found beneath the surfacer, the lives they helped bring back into the light.